Hello and welcome beyond the river. In today's video I'm gonna make Deadpool and Wolverine with polymer clay. As always, I'm starting with the wire skeleton, and I always used to make those wire frameworks symmetrically, you know, like the left and right side alike, but this time, due to me of course not struggling to get it into shape and perfectly being able to attach it to the plank, I decided to throw this wire away and cut out a new plank, not because the previous one broke in half, but because I just felt like it, and I gotta say, this way of shaping the wire is much better for making standing statues. This time around I did not have a skin color block of clay, so I just made Logan's head with grey clay, which then I'm gonna paint all the shades on. And well, it's also kind of an experiment for me, because I never worked that way. I always preferred making all the colors on the figure with clay instead of painting them, which was rather a better method considering how the face will look after I paint it, but at least for now it looks good. After over-hardening, I recorded making his characteristic Wolverine-ish hair without the camera focus, then quickly made his ears, which are always tricky, and then officially turned him into Logan by adding his, again, Wolverine-ish sideburns and a mild mustache. Attaching his spine to the body, and while doing that I realized that his head was a little too big in comparison to the rest. So after measuring everything a few times and seeing how the head fits the skeleton, I lengthened his torso a bit at the cost of his arms, and then made Logan's flesh with aluminum foil, in order to save some clay and money for clay. I started coding by making his high boots, but then changing my mind, shortening them and coating his entire legs with this lovely yellow color so that they look like Logan is taking a step forward. And then moving my way up towards the torso. And since Mr. Hugh Jackman is really jacked, I took my time to reflect this physique as accurate as I can, which is always a very tedious process for me since working with one huge element requires a fair amount of attention. And then finishing the base layer of those blue boots. After making all the shapes on the body, I can start making all the details on Wolverine's suit. I start from the bottom by making all the details on his boots. Back when I was making Wolverine's figure, there were not a lot of official Marvel trailers showing his suit clearly, but exactly when I started making the legs, the images of the Hot Toys Wolverine action figure got released, which then were my main reference images for making the rest of Wolverine's suit. This comic accurate suit is an absolute banger, and for me the second biggest highlight of it after the helmet is the belt with the X-Men logo right in the middle. Overall the belts are one of my total favorite elements to make, and this one was no exception. It was fun as hell. Now putting it onto the rest, wrapping it around a previously defined line. And to my misfortune, whilst I've already begun sculpting the entire thing you see here, just a fair way through the process, I realized that I started making the body the wrong way. See, the thing I should have done was to coat this wire with blue clay as the base layer, and then add yellow pieces of armor on top of it, because that's how Logan's costume is structured. But I managed to kind of handle this problem and removed a piece of yellow base in order to make the torso look like a big chunk of armor. Either way, I ended up being very satisfied with the suit anyway, so nothing terrible has happened. Now making the color that will go where the color usually goes. All the clay I worked with on this figure was very soft, which isn't exactly a convenient factor while making details on such a thin element. Meanwhile, making the pits on the suit that form into the shape of Logan's muscles. I always find it hilarious how the patterns on superhero costumes just have to indicate their physique. Making some further details on the armor. And highlighting the previous ones. And after over-hardening the first element, I can shape the wire that I'm gonna build the arms upon. Right now I'm setting the arms so that the figure reflects the look of my main reference image, which is the exact moment of Logan wanting to throw weight off his back. The blue clay I just applied is gonna serve as the base layer for all the details on his arms later on. Then putting this yellow sheet up on his arm, adjusting it, and then doing so on the other arm as well. Meanwhile, I'm just gonna leave you with this very satisfying time-lapse of making the hands. For the claws, well, I'd love to include them in my own Wolverine figure, but since this is the reference image I'm capturing, there wasn't exactly any space for them, so I resigned and remained true to the source material. Now I'm cutting out sort of a bracer that goes on Logan's arm and just put it onto the model. And now doing the second one. Now cutting out those shoulder pieces. As for the base, I just made a rocky, groundy, round piece with some old clay. Basically, the base will look somehow only after I paint it, so for now it will be just an ugly pulp. After putting a questionable effigy of Mr. Hugh Jackman into the oven, I decided to make it look even more questionable by means of painting his face, which I'm actually thankful I've done that way because now I know how I must not operate when I will be painting faces for the next time. So let's just ignore Logan's face in this entire ignorable paint job and just cut into making Deadpool. As for our beloved mark with the mouth, I started as usual with the armature wire, this time my old way since we're just gonna have a very unusual position. First I drew out the proportions and then went into shaping the wire. I spent a fair amount of time shaping the wire and trying to adjust it so that it fits Logan properly and it looks somewhat realistic and believable. Either way, I ended up with the back being a little too long, still I tried my best. Now I'm drilling those holes so that I know where I have to bend the wire to then slot it inside these holes to get some extra stabilization. This time I had to use a bigger amount of aluminum foil than I did while making Logan because I had to make sure that the center of gravity is somewhat maintained and the figure won't flip. Now mixing the clay for the base layer of Wilson and not showing you the process of wrapping the foil with clay because it was so tedious and time consuming that I didn't feel like recording it. Meanwhile, I rolled out a tiny ball that will serve as Wade's head and all that's left to do is to shape it, add the nose, grave the shapes for the black pieces, add them, make some further details and make the eyes. Which is just placing those white dots into an eye hole. Now with the head being done, I can start placing it onto the rest of the body. I start by giving him an aluminum spine, then giving him a neck, bending the wire a little and adjusting the torso for the neck. Strategy I adopted for making this very specific figure is to first make the torso, which I'm not going to be able to access after I place Wade onto Logan, and then making all the other parts later on, because they will still be visible, like the front side of the torso. So I start with placing this black layer in the upper part, which then I'm gonna place all the details upon. Second, I'm making this black color and correcting it. Third, I'm cutting out those red trap pieces and placing them. Fourth, I'm adding a texture to the black layer and then placing those two big red pieces, which then I'm gonna put some more details upon. Cutting out this piece of paper that reflects the shape I gotta cut out to then place it on the side of his waist. Making some additional details on the belly and starting to make Deadpool look overall more and more Deadpoolish. Now making the belt that holds his sword and adding it on Wilson's shoulder. Now to conclusively make this figure of mine an actual figure of Deadpool, I'm gonna make this very characteristic utility belt. Taking some golden copper clay, which I'll use to frame these two pieces of belts, and then adding some details onto it. Doing some finishing touches, and now with the front side done, I can finally place weight on Logan's shoulders. I am now finishing Wade's back, which throughout the entire process of his creation served as the part I held and the surface on which it rested, so I had to fix it because it was kind of a mess. Now I'm making his holsters without the guns, because they are not in the image, so I didn't want to be inaccurate. Now making those three, I don't know what it is, but it looks cool, and it's probably some pockets for magazines, right? And now adding the holsters themselves. For Wade, all that's left to do are the arms and the legs, the lower part of the legs and the lower part of the arms. I usually go from the bottom and work my way up when doing clay figures, so that's what I did right here. I've done some mind-numbingly easy details on his boots, and they ended up looking fine. Then I started making those kneecaps, well, a part that goes on the kneecaps on the suit, and finished his feet. What's kind of funny is that I'm kind of familiar with all the details and elements on Deadpool's suit and generally Deadpool overall, since this is not my first Deadpool figure I've ever created. Back in April 2020, he was an unfortunate sod taking on the role of a step in my miscarried journey of learning to sculpt. Although my overall progress since that time is debatable, the thing I can firmly claim is that I definitely improved on making the arms, and specifically the hands. So now making them so that Wade looks like he actually grabs Logan's shoulders and wants to hop on a piggyback. Making those golden details on his gloves. And cutting out the shoulder pieces. As for the stand, I thought of making the grass a somewhat different way than just painting it on the ground, so I took a grater and smushed some old green clay onto it. I don't really know about the result. And after overhardening, I can glue the two pieces I made separately onto Wade, which is this handle of a knife and this thingy for the katanas. Now for the finishing touch, I made some dark wash that, while you're not wondering why I've got toilet paper on my desk, I'm gonna apply to the entire figure. Now painting the stand, finishing it and showing you some shots that I guess indicate that this figure is anything worth to look at. thank you, Mr. Nobody, for watching. I love speaking to a void. I also gotta make those videos shorter and simpler, like almost 2 months for a little YouTube video that 0 people will watch. And I guess I just have to improve on making these figures overall, because I can't help the feeling that something's really off with this stupid thing I've made. Though I'm kinda satisfied with the end result and will maybe find an inspiration to do another one day.